when I was younger for a number of years, my life kind of revolved around the martial arts, and specifically um, around karate and around a style called Goju Ryu. Ryu just means style, but the Go and the Ju were usually translated as hard and soft. So they say this is the hard and soft style. Go was something like something that was unbending, it wouldn't move. And Ju was something more flexible. And there were lots of discussions about why it was hard and soft. And so there was a kind of surface discussion about it, that it's a kind of eclectic style that has a lot of the roundness that you would associate with some Chinese styles, and also balanced with some very hard, straight things you might associate with things that are more Japanese. It was Okinawan, so it kind of met in the middle. So they'd say, oh, okay, well, one is soft and one is hard. My teacher would talk about it differently. He would say that hard and soft meant that you had to train yourself hard. You had to be hard on yourself as a practitioner, but that you had to be gentle with everyone else. You had to have these two minds. And then just recently, I heard someone say something similar. They were talking about the concept of having a strong back and a soft front. Having this ability to kind of stand your ground while at the same time remaining kind of tender with people, right? Not letting that make you hard, even though there's something solid in what you're doing or how you're holding yourself in the world. And it reminded me of all this stuff from when I was younger. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how in Zen as well, we can understand the practice as a play between hard and soft. So now it's been a couple months. On the day of my dad's funeral, I was getting ready. We were in the chapel, and I was looking at this beautiful room, and I was seeing people getting things ready, and I was thinking to myself, I don't want, because we only live each moment once. That's always true. But this moment, had some weight. And I thought, I want to be present for this. I want to be present for what's happening in this ceremony. And I don't want, because I know myself, I don't want to sit here and watch the ceremony while I'm thinking about myself and what this all means for me. I didn't want to immediately be translating it back to a story of me. And I also knew, because I know myself, that I didn't want to sit there and kind of do a play-by-play of the ceremony as I watch it, because I have a lot of interest in ritual, and I know that I'm going to be a priest watching other priests, and I'm going to be kind of analyzing what they're doing. And I thought, oh, that's another place I can fall into very easily. And I want to be very clear, this isn't about, I don't want to fall into a discussion about what our minds should or shouldn't be, or how we should or shouldn't think. This was what I wanted. I didn't want, in this one precious opportunity to be in this ceremony that was all about my dad, I didn't want to fall into my own mind, because I would only get to do that once. I wouldn't get to go back. And so what I did, and I didn't give this a lot of thought because I just know this, was through the ceremony, I sat up very, very straight. That's all. Why? What does it mean? If we want to talk about hard and soft, the soft part, for the purposes of this discussion, is the mind. But what I mean by that is that the invitation of this practice, and again, I don't want to get into a should, but the invitation of this practice, the invitation of these teachings, is that we allow a kind of openness in the way that we sit with the world. We allow for a kind of curiosity. We allow for not knowing. We allow for vulnerability, permeability. All of that is very soft. It's not about razor sharp attention. It's not about concentration. Those have their place, they have their value. But for the most part, this practice, these teachings, do not come together as an invitation to that. It's about something very spacious, formless, in the mind. But that isn't necessarily what the mind wants to do, right? The mind wants an object. The mind seeks something to play with. You know, it's like a cat looking for a ball of yarn. And so we turn to the body. And traditionally, the way that this practice has looked and the way that this practice has felt has been that as a balance to that softness of the mind, there's a kind of hardness in our physical practice. And when I say hard, I don't mean contracted. It's solid. This concrete form becomes the hard. And I've talked about this 1,000 times, that when you stand straight. When you pick something up, you choose to pick something up. You feel your body picking something up. When you bow, this, even if it is a soft gesture, is very deliberate. We reside in the hard part. We reside in the physicality. And that allows for this spaciousness of the mind. How? In my experience, there's a kind of limit to volition. And you can see when people are really concentrating, when they're staring at their screen and they're trying to figure something out, when they're wrestling with a problem, what do? They don't sit like this. What they do is they sit like this. Or they sit like this with their elbows on the table and they stare at the screen like this. And they collapse the body. All of the volition goes to the mind. The hardness goes to the mind. And the body goes slack. It's as if we can't do both things at the same time. This practice for centuries has understood this point and has understood that if you want to make space, if you want to support this spaciousness, if you want to support the softness of the mind, you invest in the hardness of the body. And we know this from Zazen. If I sit like this, I dream. When I pay attention to the physicality of sitting and I sit up really straight, it's as if all those thoughts that I'm holding, they become harder to hold. Suddenly they're kind of greased and I can't quite grab them the way that I could before. They roll out. They're not gone, it's not magic. But they don't have such a soft place to land. And they tend to move on. We can do this experiment so easily, and we all have. I say it now as a reminder to myself and to anyone who has forgotten. The next time you're practicing sitting, whether you're sitting with us in the morning or sitting at home alone, allow yourself for a while to let the body go slack. And see how your mind takes the opportunity to start making things concrete, stirring up images, stirring up things that can be grabbed, making the mind the hard part. And then, after you've played with that a little while, sit up as straight as you can and let your neck stretch. Let your shoulders roll back. And notice how now, suddenly, there's a kind of freedom for things to be as they are. There's less energy behind the creation of thoughts. And again, I say all this not because we're supposed to hold our minds in a particular way, not because this practice is supposed to feel a particular way, but to point out, and also not to say that the body supports the mind, as if mind is primary, but instead to say there's no gap at all. If you're doing one thing, you're doing the other. If you're dropping one thing, you're dropping the other. It's very, very simple. And we can practice it all the time. We can notice all the time that the way that we show up to this moment with our bodies shapes how we show up to this moment with our mind. And if we really understand that, we can start to let go of the question of what is body and what is mind. And just notice, maybe there are ways that we like to be. Maybe there are ways that feel beneficial. Maybe there are ways that feel a little bit lost. As with everything, this is a pep talk to me. I had surgery a few weeks ago, and I found myself dropping the body. And I only started feeling good again when I allowed myself to really step back in. It meant slowing down. It meant being a little uncomfortable. But it also meant coming back to where I was. And it felt good. I'll stop there.